Will I confuse my child if I explain things differently is one of the most common comments I've heard from parents over the past decade. The fear that if they explain things differently to how their teacher explains it will just confuse their children more. I want to help, but what if I just confuse them even more? It's a completely valid concern, especially when you're trying to be supportive without stepping on the toes of your child's teacher. But here's the thing, sometimes a fresh perspective is exactly what your child needs to make something click. Let me tell you a personal story. A lot of parents live in fear that if they attempt to explain something to their child, it will confuse them. But sometimes we need things presented in a different way for them to become relevant and make sense of it. I can remember sitting as a child in the GCSE maths class and the teacher was explaining something to us. I had no idea whatsoever what she was talking about. And unfortunately, she then chose me to give her the answer. I sat and looked at her blankly before giving her an answer with only the slightest glimmer of hope that it might be right. No chance. She explained it again using the exact same words. She asked me again for the answer, but I was still none the wiser. She might as well have been speaking the foreign language. I had no clue whatsoever. With a roll of her eyes, she explained it for the third time in exactly the same way, and I still had no idea what she was on about. But now, with a bright red face and the fear that the tears would start that were welling up inside my eyes would start to roll down my cheeks, she moved on to someone else. I felt like a complete fool in front of the whole class. That night I sat with Dad, who used the idea of balancing scales, and it was something concrete that I could visualize. And I got it. It was easy. He wasn't a teacher. He just had the patience to sit and explain it to me in a way that I understood. And that scenario has stayed with me a long, long time. It wasn't magic, it was just a different approach. The advantages of explaining things differently. Firstly, it gives your child a second chance to get it. Not every brain processes information in the same way, but a new perspective can turn confusion into clarity. A few years back, I worked with a lad who was in his late 20s, was retaking his GCSE for the third time. He was on the autistic spectrum and took everything quite literally. Whenever I explain fractions in the past, I've always related it to food. So I might say, imagine we start with a cake. We cut that cake into two equal parts. You have one part, you have half. That's one of the two equal sized bits. Okay, happy? Now imagine that we cut that cake into four parts instead of two, okay? You again take one part. This time you have one quarter, one of the four parts. Still happy? We continued this for a couple more times, and he suddenly stopped me and pointed out that if we cut the cake too small, it would crumble. And I'd never considered it from that perspective before, but to him, it was a key point, and we couldn't move on from there. As much as I tried to move away from the cake and focus on something else, use a different analogy, he needed to consider it and ponder the consequence of the crumbs. Was the explanation wrong? In theory, no, but for him, yes, it was. And that's the thing, it's not about correcting what's being said by someone else. It's about finding the explanation that is right for the person that you're working with. The other thing is giving an alternative explanation builds confidence. When children understand something that they once struggled with, they can start to believe that they can actually learn, that that shift is powerful. Many children that we work with, for example, will state that they don't get algebra. They can't do algebra. It's pointless. Why do they use letters in maths? And I was chatting to one of our maths tutors the other day, and he was explaining how sometimes he plays a game with the kids he's working with. You know, kind of go, I'm thinking of a number. I'd like you to tell me what that number is. Okay. My number plus 5 is 10. What's my number? 5. Yeah, perfect. Well done. And then after a few rounds of this, he kind of like says, oh, it's getting a bit boring saying I'm thinking of a number. I'm going to call my number X. Okay. No go. Okay. X times 2 is 4. What's X? And they'll go 2. And suddenly they realize that algebra is just a game of finding unknown numbers. And that sudden confidence in their eyes as they light up, they've got it. They've gone from, I can't do this, to, I've got this, I can do this. And it's kind of like, it's a huge shift. It's a moment of clarity that can change not just maths, but also their self belief. And it also, the other thing about giving an alternative explanation is that it also models flexibility. Hearing ideas framed in different ways helps children develop problem-solving skills and trust that there's more than one way to understand something. For example, I once worked with a child struggling with spelling. The teacher had explained phonics rules, but it wasn't clicking. Instead, he made a silly memory game linking tricky spellings to funny pictures. It worked. And more importantly, the child learned that trying different approaches was part of learning, not having a failure. Okay. However, what we do need to keep in mind is offering a different explanation is a powerful approach, but there are a few things that we do need to be mindful of. We don't want to try to correct the teacher. Aim to build on what they've learned, not contradict it. You might say, okay, I understand that your teacher's explained it like that, but should we have a go at looking at it a little bit differently? Real life experiences can also help. If you're exploring measurements, you might say, instead of imagining the height of a giraffe, consider the height of your school bus, or something that they can actually visualize to make it make sense. Or it's a bit like I was explaining about using the scales, being able to visualize moving things about in the scales. It gave you something concrete, made it seem easier to comprehend. And don't feel the pressure to be perfect. You don't need to know all the answers. Even just saying, let's figure it out together, teaches your child that learning is a process and mistakes are just a part of it. When adults don't know something, it actually reassures the child that it's normal not to have the answers instantly. Teenagers especially need to remember that when they feel that they're the only one that doesn't get it. By working together as a team, you build their confidence and help them see that they're not alone. Know when to pause. If your child seems overwhelmed by it, say, okay, let's step back. Let's just have a break for now. Sometimes it's better to try again another day or ask a teacher or a tutor for support. For example, if they've tried and they're frustrated, and you might go for a walk or do something fun together or just change the subject, you'll often come back fresher and more open to new ideas. And always aim to end on a high and praise their efforts, even if you haven't sussed it completely for today. And the final point is explaining something differently doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you're trying to meet your child where they are, and that effort, your patience, your care, your willingness to help matters more than you'll ever know. So will you confuse your child if you explain things differently? The truth is, confusion doesn't come from trying something new. It comes from never finding the explanation that fits. By offering another way, you're giving them that chance. So what's next? If you'd like a little extra support while you're helping your child at home, that's exactly why I created the Clara James approach. Inside, you'll find simple, practical resources that you can use straight away, plus a monthly group Zoom call where we can chat things through. And there's also a supportive Facebook group where you'll feel like you're not on this journey alone, because sometimes just knowing that other people are walking the same path makes all the difference. If you are interested, I'll put the link in the comments below. I hope this has been helpful.